Ladies and gentlemen, I greet you today with a heart full of passion and a mind set on your victory. We are in a time where we must take control of our lives, our spaces, and our environments. You see, the life we live today is not simply a result of our decisions, but also of the invisible forces we allow to operate around us. Yes, I'm talking about the unseen, the spiritual realm, that one that shapes the physical one in ways we cannot always comprehend. The life you experience today is not merely a consequence of the decisions you make on a daily basis, but also a reflection of the spiritual forces that surround you, many of which are unseen. We often focus solely on the physical aspects of life, our actions, words, and choices, believing these are the primary drivers of our experiences. While these are important, there is a deeper truth that we must understand. Everything that happens in the physical world has a spiritual origin. The spiritual realm is not abstract or distant. It is interwoven into every aspect of our existence. And it significantly shapes what manifests in our lives. The invisible forces at play are often beyond our comprehension, yet they exert great influence over the course of our lives. There are energies, both positive and negative, that permeate our environment. These spiritual forces can either work in harmony with our life's purpose or stand in direct opposition to it. While we may not always recognize them, they are constantly interacting with us. The challenge is not merely to acknowledge the existence of these spiritual forces, but to understand their impact on our daily lives. Negative spiritual forces in particular often work through things we deem insignificant. They don't always manifest as dramatic or overt forms of evil. Instead, they subtly infiltrate our lives, often disguised as harmless objects, practices, or behaviors. They find ways to attach themselves to the spaces we occupy, drawing us away from our divine purpose. These influences thrive on confusion, unrest, and distraction, and they seek to keep us from living the life of peace, success, and fulfillment that we are meant to experience. We are often unaware of how much these forces affect us because they don't always present themselves in ways we can immediately see or touch. This is why it is so crucial to develop spiritual discernment to recognize the subtle influences that can disrupt our peace. When we allow ourselves to live in a way that is disconnected from our spiritual awareness, we give permission for these negative forces to operate in our lives, often without even realizing it. It is essential to understand that spiritual forces, both good and bad, are always present, operating in the background of our lives. Every moment of our existence is touched by the spiritual realm in ways we cannot see with the natural eye. However, through the development of spiritual insight and awareness, we begin to understand the true nature of these forces and their influence on our daily existence. We can then make intentional decisions to align ourselves with the positive spiritual forces that support our well-being and divine purpose, while distancing ourselves from the negative influences that seek to hinder us. These spiritual forces do not respect our intentions or desires. They respond to what we invite into our lives. This is why it is so important to be cautious about the people we associate with, the places we visit, and the objects we keep around us. Everything in our environment either attracts or repels certain energies. If we surround ourselves with things, symbols, or habits that are aligned with negativity or spiritual decay, we open the door for these forces to gain a foothold in our lives. If we seek peace, joy, and fulfillment, then we must consciously choose to remove any influence that disrupts our spiritual harmony. In order to break free from these negative forces and truly embrace the life we are meant to lead, we must become more intentional about what we allow into our lives. It requires awareness, discipline, and a commitment to protecting our environment, both physical and spiritual. Once we begin to make these changes, we will notice a transformation in our life. The peace we seek will come, the clarity we crave will emerge, and we will step more fully into our divine purpose, knowing that we have taken control of the unseen forces around us. The spiritual realm will no longer be something we fear or ignore. It will become something we consciously engage with as we choose to walk in alignment with positive forces that support our highest good. There are two primary types of spiritual forces that govern our lives, positive and negative. While the positive forces work to support our well-being, align us with our divine purpose, and guide us toward peace, the negative forces aim to disrupt, confuse, and obstruct our journey. These negative forces, often referred to as adversarial forces or demonic influences, thrive on chaos and disorder. They seek to infiltrate our lives, derail our progress, and keep us from fulfilling our true potential. What is important to understand is that these forces do not operate in a vacuum. They actively use the things around us, our environment, the objects we possess, the people we interact with, and the habits we cultivate as tools to influence our lives in ways we may not fully understand. The adversary, in its most subtle form, does not always manifest as something obviously evil or malevolent. In fact, the most dangerous negative forces are often the ones that operate behind the scenes, unnoticed and unnoticed. They use everyday objects, practices, and ideas to create an atmosphere of spiritual decay, which over time can lead to confusion, discontent, and even destruction. For instance, items in your home or workspace that may seem benign on the surface, such as symbols, artwork, trinkets, or even certain books, can be conduits for spiritual influence. These seemingly harmless objects carry within them an energy that either invites positive or negative spiritual forces into your life. The adversary is clever in his tactics, and it often hides behind things that are culturally accepted or socially normal. It may be a gift given with good intentions or a habit passed down through generations. Yet, what we fail to realize is that these objects and practices can carry a spiritual weight that is detrimental to our well-being. They may represent idolatry, superstition, or occult influences that are foreign to the divine plan for our lives. These objects may draw us into patterns of thinking that are rooted in fear, doubt, or confusion, rather than faith, peace, and clarity. Similarly, negative forces can work through the people we allow into our lives. The energy of those around us can either uplift us or pull us down. If we surround ourselves with people who constantly sow discord, negativity, or doubt, we open ourselves to the influence of those same spiritual forces. The energy of those we interact with daily can create an environment that either attracts light or darkness. This is why it is so important to be discerning in our relationships. What we allow to enter our lives through others will inevitably impact our thoughts, emotions, and spiritual well-being. The negative forces are not content to simply stay dormant. They are actively working to take root in our lives, influencing our thoughts, decisions, and actions. The more we entertain these negative influences, whether through objects, people, or habits, the more we allow them to gain strength in our lives. It is often through the small, seemingly insignificant choices we make that we open the door for the adversary to work. Over time, these choices accumulate and form a pattern that makes it increasingly difficult to break free from the hold of these forces. This is why it is critical to become spiritually aware and discerning. We must be able to recognize the ways in which negative forces manifest in our lives. We must learn to identify the subtle signs that indicate something is out of alignment with our divine purpose. It is not enough to simply live passively, allowing anything to enter our lives without question. Instead, we must actively guard our hearts and minds protecting ourselves from the negative forces that seek to disrupt our peace and spiritual harmony. In practical terms, this means being selective about the things we expose ourselves to. It involves removing items from our lives that may carry negative energy, cutting ties with relationships that drain us spiritually, and reevaluating habits or practices that pull us away from our divine calling. By taking intentional action to cleanse our environment and our lives of these negative influences, we are effectively shutting the door on the adversary's ability to operate in our space. In doing so, we create an atmosphere that is conducive to peace, clarity, and spiritual growth, an atmosphere in which positive spiritual forces can thrive. The more we align ourselves with these positive energies, the more we will experience the life we were created to live. In life, we are often surrounded by objects and symbols that we may perceive as insignificant or merely decorative. However, what we may not realize is that everything in our environment carries an energy, either positive or negative. These things, which we might consider simple possessions, actually have a profound impact on our spiritual well-being. Every object, whether it's a piece of artwork, a gift from a friend, or even a trinket that seems harmless, can either draw us closer to our divine purpose or act as a vessel for negative spiritual influences. We must understand that these items are never neutral. They carry with them energies that either invite peace or cause disruption in our lives. The objects we possess can serve as conduits for spiritual forces. For example, an item might seem like just a decoration, but if it carries a negative symbol or is associated with an occult or superstitious practice, it can open doors for destructive spiritual forces. These forces are subtle, and they work in ways that are often difficult to detect with the naked eye. They may attach themselves to an object, an image, or a symbol. And by keeping that object in our space, we unknowingly invite negativity into our lives. Over time, this can lead to a gradual shift in the atmosphere of our home, our office, or wherever we spend our time. This is why it is so important to pay close attention to the things we allow into our lives. We often underestimate the power of these objects and their ability to affect our spiritual health. For example, an object that represents a belief or practice that goes against the values we hold dear can unconsciously influence our mindset. It may draw us into negative thought patterns or create a sense of unease and discomfort in our lives. Even if the item has no direct or obvious harmful effect, its spiritual significance can create an atmosphere that disrupts the peace and clarity we need to focus on our divine purpose. The same principle applies to gifts and mementos we receive from others. While a gift is typically given with good intentions, it's essential to recognize that not all gifts are blessings. Some gifts, while appearing kind or thoughtful, may carry an unseen spiritual weight. For example, a gift that has been tied to a particular cultural or spiritual belief, one that is at odds with our values, can bring with it an energy that is not aligned with our divine purpose. While the giver may not have any harmful intentions, the spiritual impact of that gift can create a shift in our environment, subtly influencing our thoughts, behaviors, and emotions. Additionally, objects that are linked to past experiences, memories, or relationships can hold a particular energy that may not always be beneficial. These items could carry with them the weight of past trauma, unresolved emotions, or spiritual baggage that can affect our current state of being. A memento from a past relationship, for example, might carry with it negative emotions such as regret, bitterness, or heartbreak. Even though these feelings may seem like distant memories, the energy of the objects associated with those times can linger in our space, disrupting our peace and preventing us from moving forward. This is why it is essential to regularly evaluate the things we keep around us. It's not just about clearing physical clutter. It's about recognizing that the items we possess have a spiritual influence on us. The objects we keep should reflect the person we are becoming, not the person we used to be or the influences we no longer wish to entertain. To create an environment conducive to peace, clarity, and spiritual growth, we must consciously choose the things that align with our values, beliefs, and divine purpose. Removing objects that attract negative spiritual energy is a necessary step in reclaiming our space and our peace. As we begin to let go of things that no longer serve us, we make room for the positive forces that are in alignment with our highest good. It's not always easy to part with certain possessions, especially when they hold sentimental value. However, we must be willing to let go of anything that stands in the way of our spiritual growth and peace. By removing these items, we are actively choosing to clear our environment of negativity and make room for the divine order and peace that we were created to experience. In doing so, we are opening ourselves to the possibility of living a life of greater clarity, purpose, and fulfillment. As human beings, we are created as spiritual beings with a purpose far greater than simply existing in the physical world. We are temples of the Holy Spirit, meant to reflect the divine purpose and peace that come from being aligned with God. This understanding of our spiritual identity is foundational to our lives. Our bodies are not just vessels for physical activity. They are sacred spaces meant to house the divine presence and reflect His will in every area of our lives. Therefore, it is essential that we prioritize purity in both our internal and external worlds. Spiritual purity is not just about the thoughts we entertain and the words we speak. It extends far beyond that into the physical realm of what we surround ourselves with and allow to permeate our environment. Purity in the spiritual sense means maintaining an alignment with God's purpose for our lives and rejecting anything that would distract or pull us away from that alignment. This is not simply about moral purity or avoiding sinful behaviors. It is a broader concept that includes the energy we allow to enter our lives through the objects, people, and practices that we engage with. When we allow things into our lives that do not reflect the holiness of God, we disrupt the purity of our spiritual environment. These impurities, whether they come in the form of negative influences, toxic relationships, or objects that carry harmful energies, create an atmosphere where negative spiritual forces can take root and grow. Being a temple of the Holy Spirit means that we must be intentional about what we invite into our spaces. Just as a physical temple is carefully maintained, cleansed, and protected, so too must our spiritual temples be. The things we expose ourselves to can either nurture our spirit and strengthen our connection with God, or they can pull us away, leading us toward confusion, doubt, and spiritual decay. It is therefore crucial to develop a discerning spirit that can recognize when something or someone is not in alignment with God's divine plan for our lives. This discernment allows us to filter out the negative influences that seek to pollute our spiritual temple. The purity of our environment is just as important as the purity of our hearts. If we are surrounded by negativity, whether it be in the form of toxic relationships, harmful media, or objects that carry destructive spiritual energy, we are essentially allowing those impurities to infiltrate our lives. They begin to affect our thoughts, emotions, and actions in ways that move us further from our spiritual goals. A pure environment is one where peace, joy, and clarity reign, where the presence of God can freely move and operate in our lives. When we protect our environment from negativity, we create a space where spiritual growth can flourish and where divine order can take root. Purity, therefore, is not just a matter of personal conviction, it is a spiritual discipline that requires constant attention. We must be vigilant in guarding our minds and our hearts, but we must also be diligent in guarding our physical spaces. It is easy to overlook the power of our surroundings, thinking that as long as we are internally aligned with God, external influences won't matter. However, this is not the case. Our environment has a profound impact on our spiritual state. What we allow into our homes, our offices, and the spaces we inhabit can either elevate our spiritual well-being or lead us into spiritual complacency. This is why it is so important to make conscious decisions about the things we keep around us. Objects, people, and influences that do not align with God's will for our lives must be removed. This process of cleansing our environments is not merely about eliminating physical clutter, but about eliminating spiritual clutter that hinders our growth. It involves taking inventory of our surroundings and being willing to let go of anything that does not reflect the purity and peace we seek to embody. In the same way that a temple is prepared to receive the divine, we must prepare our lives to receive the fullness of God's presence. This involves not only spiritual practices such as prayer and worship, but also practical actions clearing out negative influences, removing objects that carry harmful energy, and creating an environment that reflects the divine order and purity that God desires for us. When we make room for God's presence by cleansing our space, we invite His peace, clarity, and divine guidance to dwell with us. And as we align ourselves with His will, we begin to experience the fullness of the life we were created to live. In life, we are continually exposed to influences, both internal and external, that shape who we are and how we experience the world. While many of these influences come from the decisions we make and the people we interact with, there is another category of influence that often goes unnoticed: objects and items that carry spiritual significance. These objects, whether tangible or symbolic, have the ability to affect our spiritual state in ways we may not fully understand. Though they may appear harmless or even sentimental, some items carry with them spiritual weight that can draw us into negative patterns of thought and behavior. When we allow these objects into our lives, we are unknowingly inviting in energies that can disrupt our peace and hinder our spiritual growth. Objects that have spiritual significance are not always immediately recognizable. They might be gifts from well-meaning friends or family, or items we've acquired over time without considering their deeper meaning or origin. However, everything in the physical world has an energy attached to it. Even something as simple as a decorative item can carry spiritual influences that are not in alignment with our highest good. For example, objects that are tied to occult practices, idolatry, or superstition can invite negative forces into our lives. They may seem like innocent pieces of art or trinkets, but they carry with them an energy that can disrupt the peace we are meant to experience. Similarly, there are items that may have personal significance but are connected to past experiences, relationships, or traumas that we have not fully healed from. A memento from a past relationship, for instance, might seem like a harmless reminder of a time gone by. However, it can carry emotional and spiritual baggage that pulls us into negative patterns of thought or behavior. The energy of such objects can keep us stuck in the past, preventing us from moving forward and fully embracing the life we are meant to live. These items are often tied to unresolved emotions such as regret, pain, or bitterness. And by keeping them in our possession, we unconsciously allow these negative energies to influence our present. Another key aspect of spiritual influence through objects is the role of symbols. Throughout history, various symbols have been used in spiritual and religious practices to represent specific beliefs or powers. While some symbols are positive and represent faith, hope, and divine protection, others are used in practices that are in direct opposition to our spiritual well-being. For example, symbols associated with witchcraft, sorcery, or the occult practices can attract destructive spiritual forces. These symbols are not neutral. They carry with them an energy that can open the door to spiritual disturbances and unrest. It is important to recognize that spiritual influence works in subtle ways. These objects or symbols do not always announce their presence or their intent to harm. They often operate behind the scenes, quietly affecting our thoughts, emotions, and decisions. Over time, the energy associated with these items can accumulate, creating an environment that is charged with negativity. This can manifest in various ways, perhaps in a constant sense of unease, confusion, or a lack of peace. When we live in an environment where negative spiritual forces are at work, we may find it difficult to focus, to experience joy, or to make clear decisions. Our spiritual lives become clouded, and we are distracted from the purpose and peace that we are meant to experience. The good news is that we have the power to remove these influences from our lives. It is up to us to recognize the impact that objects and symbols have on our spiritual state and to take action to protect ourselves from their influence. This process involves evaluating the things we surround ourselves with and determining whether they align with our values, our beliefs, and our divine purpose. If they do not, it is time to let them go. It may be difficult to part with items that hold sentimental value, but we must be willing to release anything that keeps us from experiencing the fullness of God's peace and divine purpose for our lives. By removing these negative influences, we create space for the positive spiritual forces that will nurture our growth, peace, and clarity. Our environment becomes a reflection of the spiritual purity we seek to embody. And as we cleanse our space, we begin to notice a shift in our thoughts, our emotions, and our actions. We make room for the divine to work more freely in our lives, and we step into a new level of spiritual freedom and clarity. This process of clearing out the clutter, both physical and spiritual, opens the door to a life of greater peace, focus, and fulfillment. As individuals, we are not passive participants in the unfolding of our lives. We hold within us the power to shape our environment, to control the energy that surrounds us, and to influence the course of our own experiences. This authority is not something that comes from external forces, but is a gift given to us through our divine purpose. It is a power rooted in our spiritual identity, and it is our responsibility to exercise that power in a way that aligns with our higher calling and divine purpose. One of the most profound ways we can demonstrate this authority is by taking control of our environment, by consciously deciding what we allow to remain in our lives and what we choose to remove. Our environment is far more than just the physical space we occupy. It is a reflection of our inner world, the thoughts we think, the energy we give off, and the things we allow to enter our hearts and minds. The people we interact with, the media we consume, and the objects we keep around us all contribute to the atmosphere in which we live. This atmosphere can either nurture our spiritual growth in alignment with our divine purpose, or it can pull us away from our highest good, drawing us into negativity, confusion, and stagnation. The authority we have over our environment is not a passive one. It requires intentional action, discernment, and the willingness to make choices that are in alignment with the spiritual truth of who we are. We must actively guard our space and our energy, ensuring that only those influences that uplift us, challenge us to grow, and encourage us toward peace and fulfillment are allowed in. By taking charge of our surroundings, we create an environment that nurtures our spiritual health and allows us to live in harmony with our divine purpose. One of the first steps in exercising this authority is developing spiritual discernment, the ability to recognize when something or someone is not in alignment with our highest good. This requires us to cultivate a deep awareness of the spiritual forces at work in our lives. It means paying attention to how we feel in certain environments, how our thoughts and emotions are affected by the people and objects around us, and whether we experience a sense of peace or unrest in specific situations. When we become attuned to these subtle spiritual signals, we are better equipped to take action and remove anything from our lives that is not serving our highest good. This process of taking control of our environment goes beyond simply eliminating negative influences. It also involves consciously filling our space with things that promote spiritual growth and well-being. It means intentionally surrounding ourselves with people, objects, and practices that align with our values, support our goals, and encourage us to live in harmony with our divine purpose. This could be through creating a space that is conducive to peace, clarity, and focus, or by engaging in spiritual practices that uplift us and bring us closer to God. Our environment should reflect the person we are becoming, the person who is walking in alignment with their higher calling and striving to fulfill their divine destiny. When we take ownership of our environment, we are also taking ownership of our spiritual journey. We are acknowledging that we have the power to influence the direction of our lives and that we are not at the mercy of external circumstances. We recognize that the energy we allow into our space can either propel us toward our purpose or pull us away from it. By consciously removing negative influences and inviting positive forces into our lives, we align ourselves with the divine flow of peace, clarity, and purpose that we were created to experience. As we let go of these negative influences, we are also creating space for healing and restoration. Many of us hold on to things because we fear that without them, we will lose a part of ourselves. However, the truth is that by letting go, we free ourselves from the emotional and spiritual baggage that has been holding us back, whether it's an item linked to past trauma, a person who causes us emotional distress, or a habit that leads to destructive thinking. Each step of release allows us to move closer to our authentic selves, the people we were created to be. This act of letting go also demonstrates our trust in God's provision. By choosing to release what is no longer aligned with our highest good, we are placing our faith in the idea that God will replace what we release with something better, something that will enhance our spiritual journey and bring us closer to His purpose for our lives. It is an act of surrender, of acknowledging that our will is secondary to God's plan. As we surrender to this divine flow, we become more open to the blessings and opportunities that await us, and we position ourselves to receive greater peace, fulfillment, and spiritual clarity. In practice, letting go can involve a conscious decision to declutter our physical spaces, remove toxic influences from our relationships, or break free from harmful habits. It might require the courage to make hard choices, but each choice will bring us closer to living in alignment with our highest purpose. Through this process, we learn that our true source of peace and fulfillment is not found in the things we hold on to, but in the divine presence that fills the space we create when we let go. When we embark on the spiritual journey of evaluating and removing things from our lives that no longer align with our divine purpose, we begin to experience a profound transformation. One of the key benefits of this cleansing process is the restoration of peace and clarity in our lives. Peace is one of the most valuable gifts we can experience, as it creates the foundation for all other aspects of spiritual growth and well-being. Without peace, it is difficult to maintain focus, make sound decisions, or hear the guidance of the Holy Spirit. When our lives are cluttered with negative influences, whether through objects, relationships, or mindsets, our peace is compromised, leaving us feeling unsettled, anxious, or uncertain. By removing the things that attract negative spiritual forces, we open ourselves up to a renewed sense of tranquility and calm. Our environment begins to reflect the spiritual alignment we seek, and this shift allows the peace of God to fill the spaces we inhabit. When we experience peace in our environment, it influences every part of our being. It impacts our thoughts, our relationships, and our decision making. We become more centered and grounded, and we find ourselves more capable of discerning God's will for our lives. This clarity helps us to make choices that are in alignment with our higher purpose, bringing us closer to the fulfillment of our divine calling. Along with peace, we experience a renewed sense of focus. In a cluttered, chaotic environment, it is easy to lose sight of our goals, to become distracted by external influences, and to stray from our true purpose. However, when we consciously create a space that supports our spiritual growth, we gain the clarity needed to stay on track. Focus is a vital aspect of spiritual and personal growth because it allows us to concentrate our energy on what truly matters. The distractions that once pulled us away from our goals begin to fade, and we are able to direct our attention toward the things that bring us closer to our divine destiny. Whether it's through prayer, study, or engaging in the work we were created to do, focus enables us to take the necessary steps toward achieving our full potential. This process of restoring peace and focus also involves the development of discernment. As we clear our spaces and lives of negative influences, we become more attuned to the spiritual atmosphere around us. We learn to recognize when something is out of alignment with our divine purpose, and we gain the wisdom to act accordingly. This heightened discernment allows us to make decisions more wisely, to choose the right relationships, and to invest our time and energy in pursuits that support our growth. It enables us to walk in greater confidence, knowing that we are aligned with God's will and that we are not being swayed by external forces. In addition to peace and focus, the process of removing negative influences brings about an increased sense of spiritual clarity. As we clear away the spiritual clutter in our lives, we create space for God's voice to be heard more clearly. The distractions and obstacles that once clouded our judgment and decision-making abilities are removed, allowing us to hear the Holy Spirit's guidance with greater precision. Spiritual clarity helps us to understand our purpose in a deeper way, to see the path ahead with more insight, and to move forward with the confidence that we are walking in the direction we were meant to go. As we remove the things that no longer serve us, we also open the door to new opportunities and growth. This process of clearing our space, both physically and spiritually, creates room for new things to enter our lives. It might be new relationships, new opportunities for personal or professional growth, or new experiences that bring us closer to our divine purpose. When we remove negative influences, we essentially create a void that must be filled with positivity and growth. God, in His faithfulness, will always fill that space with what is best, bring us closer to the life of peace, clarity, and fulfillment that we were created to experience. The act of removing things that attract negativity is an act of self-care and spiritual empowerment. It is a choice to honor ourselves and the divine calling placed upon our lives. As we let go of the things that hinder our growth, we open ourselves to the abundance and blessings that God desires to pour into our lives. The process restores peace, clarity, focus, and discernment, allowing us to live more fully in alignment with God's will. By creating an environment that nurtures our spiritual well-being, we set ourselves up for a future filled with divine purpose, peace, and fulfillment. When we commit to removing negative influences from our lives, we are not only protecting our spiritual peace, but also laying the foundation for a life that is truly aligned with our divine purpose. This process involves more than just eliminating distractions or negative forces. It is about creating a space where we can experience spiritual freedom and true growth. The act of purification is deeply transformative, as it allows us to release what no longer serves us and open ourselves up to new opportunities for healing, development, and divine guidance. One of the most significant results of cleansing our lives and environment is the creation of spiritual freedom. Spiritual freedom is the ability to live without the constraints of past hurts, limiting beliefs, or harmful influences that hold us back. When we remove the things that attract negative forces, whether they be toxic relationships, destructive habits, or spiritually harmful objects, we are no longer weighed down by the burdens of the past. We gain the freedom to move forward in our spiritual journey without being encumbered by old wounds or attachments that no longer align with our highest good. This freedom allows us to embrace new possibilities, experience greater peace, and live more fully in the present moment. The more we remove negative influences from our lives, the more we create an environment that is conducive to growth and personal development. By letting go of things that clutter our spiritual and physical spaces, we make room for new things, things that nurture our souls and align with the purpose we were created to fulfill. This could involve new relationships, fresh perspectives, or opportunities that we had not previously considered. When we let go of what no longer serves us, we create space for God to work more freely in our lives, guiding us toward the opportunities and experiences that will bring us closer to our divine destiny. Additionally, as we create space for spiritual freedom and growth, we begin to experience a deeper connection with God. Our lives become less about external distractions and more about tuning into the divine presence that is constantly available to us. This connection is where true fulfillment lies. It is in the quiet moments of prayer, reflection, and listening to the guidance of the Holy Spirit that we find the clarity and direction we need. When we eliminate the distractions that cloud our spiritual sight, we open ourselves up to a clearer, more intimate relationship with God, which becomes the source of all our strength, peace, and clarity. This process of spiritual freedom also leads to a heightened sense of self-awareness. As we remove negative influences, we begin to see ourselves more clearly and to recognize what truly matters in our lives. We develop a deeper understanding of who we are and the purpose for which we were created. This self-awareness enables us to make choices that are in alignment with our highest values and divine calling. It empowers us to live authentically and with intention, knowing that we are actively contributing to the fulfillment of our life's purpose. When we embrace this process of releasing negative influences, we cultivate a spirit of discernment that allows us to navigate the world with greater wisdom. We begin to recognize when we are being pulled into situations or relationships that do not serve our spiritual growth. This discernment helps us to make wise decisions that protect our peace and align with our divine purpose. It becomes easier to avoid temptations, distractions, and harmful influences because we have learned to trust our inner guidance and to act in accordance with our values. The power of spiritual freedom also extends to the impact it has on those around us. When we cleanse our own lives and environments, we begin to radiate peace and clarity, which influences the people we interact with. Our ability to live in alignment with our divine purpose can inspire and uplift others, encouraging them to do the same. This ripple effect creates an environment where positivity, growth, and spiritual freedom are shared, extending far beyond our individual lives. By purging negative influences, we contribute not only to our own peace and fulfillment, but also to the collective good, encouraging others to live more fully in their own divine calling. The process of releasing negative influences and embracing spiritual freedom is an act of faith and trust in God's plan for our lives. It requires us to let go of the familiar and trust that God will fill the spaces we create with His divine provision and guidance. As we make room for new opportunities, growth, and healing, we are aligning ourselves with a life that reflects peace, clarity, and purpose. This act of cleansing our lives is not merely about removing distractions. It is about making space for the divine flow of God's love, wisdom, and guidance to fill every area of our lives. And in doing so, we step into a life of greater fulfillment, alignment, and spiritual freedom. In conclusion, the act of removing negative influences from our lives is not just a process of decluttering or getting rid of material possessions. It is a profound spiritual practice that allows us to realign ourselves with our divine purpose. Throughout this journey, we uncover the power of discernment, the freedom that comes with letting go of what no longer serves us, and the profound peace that emerges when we create space for spiritual growth. By actively choosing to release harmful objects, toxic relationships, and negative habits, we open ourselves to a life of clarity, focus, and spiritual renewal. As we remove these distractions, we make room for the divine presence to fill our lives, guiding us toward greater peace, purpose, and fulfillment. The result is not only a cleaner, more harmonious environment, but a stronger connection with our higher selves and with God. This spiritual cleansing empowers us to live authentically, to walk with confidence in our divine calling, and to be a positive influence on the world around us. Remember, the process of releasing these influences is not always easy, but it is essential for spiritual growth and for stepping into the life we are meant to lead. It is a courageous act of faith, trust, and spiritual discipline that ultimately brings us closer to the peace, clarity, and divine purpose we seek. Let us move forward free from the weight of unnecessary attachments and embrace the spiritual freedom that awaits us on the other side. By doing so, we create the conditions for a life of true fulfillment, alignment, and peace.